All right, welcome back to Biology Day 77. We'll continue on with part 2. So in part 2, we're going to be talking about blood and the components of blood and how that helps us actually accomplish the functions of the circulatory system transporting things around. So just kind of a fun little video if you get a chance. The Bloodmobile by They Might Be Giants. It's kind of cute. It's actually got some pretty good science in it, so it's kind of a fun little song that you can kind of listen to and pay attention to. So we talk about the components of blood, so what's actually in blood. So what they'll do is they take blood, put it in a machine called a centrifuge, which spins it around really fast, and then the densest stuff gets settled out at the bottom of the test tube that it's in. So this is the densest stuff at the bottom, and the lightest stuff stays at the top. Now, most of blood is the liquid portion called blood plasma. It's kind of this pale yellow or straw-colored liquid. The next biggest chunk is the red blood cells. That's what gives blood its red color. They're called erythrocytes, and they make up about 40 to 45% of the blood. And then there's this little layer that's kind of, this picture looks kind of blue, but in reality it's kind of whitish or off-whitish. Sometimes it's called the Buffy coat, and it is composed of white blood cells and platelets. So on our image here, this is a red blood cell, this is a white blood cell, and that's a platelet that you're looking at down there. So what is blood plasma? Again, it's that liquid material. Here you can see kind of at the top of the centrifuge test tube there. It's mostly made of water. It helps regulate body temperature. So if a part of your body gets overheated, so you're exercising your muscles a whole bunch, then that blood can carry the heat away and to somewhere else where you can get rid of it. Or if you've got a body part that's cold, it can receive blood from somewhere else to help warm it up. There's three kind of key proteins that help are involved in the plasma. One is called albumin, which helps regulate blood volume, how much blood we have in our body. Second one is called globulins. They help fight against infection. And the third one is fibrinogen, and that's involved in blood clotting. We'll talk about that in just a bit. All right, so red blood cells, or erythrocytes, they transport oxygen and CO2. Inside of the red blood cells, there's a molecule, a protein called hemoglobin. And hemoglobin actually holds the oxygen, binds to it, and that's what gives the red blood cells their color red. Is there's actually an iron atom in the middle of that hemoglobin molecule. Interestingly, red blood cells don't have a nucleus, so they can only live for about 120 days because they don't have any way to repair themselves. So that's about 4 months. So 3 times a year or every 4 months or so, you've actually replaced all of the red blood cells in your body. You're making them constantly and losing them constantly. White blood cells are known as leukocytes. So here you can see the things they do. They fight infections, parasites, and bacteria. They're kind of your army, your own personal little army that make up the component of the immune system in your circulatory system. And some of them have the ability to make more white blood cells. So once your body recognizes what the bad guys look like, then those memory cells, which are a type of white blood cell, will stick around and they'll help you fight against the next time you see it. And this is how vaccines work. This is how what we call active immunity works. Is you fight against something and you're like, oh, that's something that I've seen before and I know I can fight it. There's several different types of white blood cells, and this is showing 6 of them on here. You don't need to worry about the different types, so you can see kind of they've got different kind of arrangements of the nucleus. Some are really big, some are kind of spread out there. But just white blood cells, that's kind of these purple ones, and then these are red blood cells in between. All right, so this is an animation showing a white blood cell, and it's chasing down a little bacteria here. So you can see the white blood cell cruising around trying to get the bacteria, and then in between are the red blood cells. So we'll let that kind of cycle through. So white blood cell, red blood cell, bacteria. There it goes, white blood cell. Right, just kind of cruising around trying to get that bacteria. Oh, there it goes, we got it. All right, we'll go and move on there. So in addition to red blood cells and white blood cells, we have these things called platelets, and they help blood clot. So they stick to the edge of broken blood vessels. So our arteries or veins or our capillaries, platelets will stick to the edge of that if it gets broken. It's no longer smooth, and they feel kind of that roughness of it, and they'll stick to the edge of it. And you can see in this image, they're kind of just in between the red blood cells there. And they lead to blood clotting, so we don't keep bleeding out. We don't die if we have an open wound. So here's that opening in the injury. The platelets will come in, they'll stick to the edge of that broken blood vessel, and they'll secrete proteins, one of which is fibrinogen, and that binds to the injury and promotes clotting. They actually secrete other proteins, which leads to this cascade of proteins that ultimately ends up in being fibrinogen, which binds across there. So this next slide is going to show kind of animations of these different events occurring. So here you can see this opening, right kind of behind the thrombin there. From here you can see this opening in the blood vessel. Things are getting pulled out of it, kind of like just a hole in a pipe. But then the platelets are going to come in and they're going to start producing that fibrin netting that goes across. And as that fibrin netting goes across, the red blood cells and white blood cells that were just kind of going out get clogged up in it, and they're no longer able to exit that opening. And so as a result, they kind of fill it up, and everything else can flow back past it the way they're supposed to. So that's kind of a quick animation showing that happening. All right. So that's the end of part 2. We'll come back for part 3, and just a little bit look at the respiratory system. So let me stop it here.